I hadn't spoken to my Uncle Raymond in almost a decade. Not because of any falling out, he was just distant. The kind of man who sent birthday cards with no return address, who never showed up to family dinners, and who always smelled faintly of formaldehyde, even when he wasn't working. So when I got the call from a lawyer saying he had passed and left his property to me, I was surprised. When I found out that property was an old funeral home in rural Pennsylvania, I was confused. And when I drove out there a week later, I was already regretting it. The building stood alone at the end of a cracked, weed-choked driveway. 3 stories of rotting wood, peeling paint, and shuttered windows. A sign hung lopsided over the door. The letters faded into ghost shadows. Weatherby and Sons, Est, 1908. There were no sons, just Raymond. Inside, it smelled like dust and lavender oil. The air was heavy, like it hadn't been moved in years. I walked through the front room slowly, my footsteps muffled by worn carpet. There was a reception desk, a small waiting area with cracked leather chairs, and behind a set of heavy oak doors, the chapel. Empty pews faced a raised platform, with a faded red curtain, no caskets, no bodies, just silence. The power still worked, somehow. The fridge in the embalming room hummed to life when I flipped the breaker, and the lights in the main hallway flickered on in stuttering bursts. I didn't go into the basement, not that day. I found the keys in a drawer, along with a yellowed envelope marked with my name in blocky, old man handwriting. Inside was the deed. No letter, no explanation. Just a signature I hadn't seen since I was 16. I wasn't sure why I stayed the night. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the 3-hour drive back to the city. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. But I made a bed out of a couch in the viewing room and tried to sleep. At 2:13 a.m., I heard footsteps on the floor above me. Not creaks or settling wood footsteps. Measured, slow, as if someone was pacing. I sat up, heart pounding, but told myself it was a squirrel in the attic, or maybe the old plumbing knocking. I didn't investigate. I just waited in the dark until it stopped. The next morning, I told myself I had imagined it. Funeral homes are creepy. That's their whole brand. Shadows linger. Grief stains the walls. Maybe I was just tired, unsettled by the smell of chemicals and the chill in the air. I made coffee in a dented percolator I found under the sink. It tasted like rust, but it helped clear my head. I started exploring the place in earnest. The offices upstairs were filled with boxes of old paperwork, ledgers, and Polaroids of casket displays. One door at the end of the hallway was locked. I assumed it was Raymond's bedroom, but there was no key. I didn't think much of it until I passed the preparation room again and noticed something that made me stop cold. There was a toe tag on the steel table in the center. Just a tag, no body. It hadn't been there yesterday. I stood there for a long time, staring at the small, white rectangle. The name was smudged, but I could make out the date. July 12th, 2 days before I arrived. Raymond had been dead for over a week. So who? I didn't finish the thought. I told myself I was mistaken, and I moved on. I'd spent most of that day trying to convince myself to leave, but there was something about the place. Some weird pull I couldn't explain, like a magnet under my skin. Rationally, I knew I should have packed up and driven away, called the lawyer, told them to sell the building and send me the check. But instead, I stayed. I cleaned a little, threw out moldy food from the pantry, took inventory of the rooms. The embalming tools were still there, neatly arranged on metal trays. The viewing room still had folded pamphlets from a service in 2016. I even found a small, white suit tucked into a dry cleaning bag behind the chapel curtain. For a child, it made my stomach turn. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock at the front door. A single, hard rap. Not tentative, not friendly. I opened it to find an old man in a dark green jacket and a baseball cap with a faded American flag. His eyes were sunken, but alert. "You're Raymond's nephew?" he asked. I nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. You staying here? He said it flat, like it wasn't a question. I might, just for a bit. Why? The man sighed and pulled something from his coat pocket. A folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges, covered in typewritten text. Then you need this. He handed it to me without another word and turned to leave. Wait, who are you? Name's Ed. I worked here with your uncle for a long time, he said, never looking back. You'll understand soon enough. Just follow the rules. He got into a rusted pickup and drove off down the gravel path. I watched the dust settle in the air like ash back inside. I sat at the reception desk and unfolded the paper. Rules for the proper operation of Weatherby and Sons Funeral Home, revised 2008. Internal use only if the fridge hums louder than usual. Between 1 o'clock and 2 a.m., do not investigate. It's not broken. It's not your concern. Each night at 10 p.m. sharp, ensure that every casket in the display room is closed and locked. If any are open, you must close them personally. Do not ask for help. Never turn off the overhead lights in the embalming room. They may flicker or buzz, but they must remain on at all times. If they go out on their own, leave the building immediately and return after sunrise. If you find any body that is not recorded in the official logbook, do not attempt to identify it. Do not photograph it. Do not touch it. Cover it with a sheet and ignore it. Every Thursday, a delivery will arrive between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. Do not greet the driver. Do not sign any forms. Accept the package, lock it in cold storage, and record. Only the date. No names. That door at the end of the second-floor hallway must remain locked at all times. The key was never meant to be used. If you hear crying from inside the chapel after midnight, do not enter. No one is inside. There never was. I read the rules twice. At first I thought it was some kind of sick joke. Maybe my uncle had lost his mind before he died. Maybe Ed was just some eccentric old man keeping up the ritual. But something about the list chilled me. Not the content itself, but how seriously it was written. Like company policy. Like OSHA. Guidelines for the dead. I put the list down and stared at the embalming room across the hall. The lights were buzzing. That night, I stayed downstairs. I kept the list beside me on the desk and watched the clock inch toward 10 p.m. at exactly 9:59. I walked into the display room and locked every single casket. There were 5. One was cracked open an inch. I pushed it closed slowly. My breath held the entire time. Nothing happened. No voices, no movement, just the sound of the latch clicking into place. I turned to leave, but paused. Something in the corner of the room caught my eye, a small shape, almost hidden behind a potted plant. It was a shoe. A child's black dress shoe, polished, out of place. I didn't pick it up. I didn't want to know how it got there. By 11:30, I had made a sort of camp in the front office. Coffee, blanket, rule sheet. I watched the hallway, waiting for something, anything to happen. At 1:06 a.m., the fridge in the embalming room started to hum. Loud. Too loud. Like a lawnmower trapped in metal. I sat very still. It kept humming until 1:42. When it finally stopped, I exhaled. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. That night, I dreamed of a body sitting up on its own, not jerking, rising slowly, like it was confused about where it was. Its mouth was open. Its eyes were stitched shut. Something black dripped from the corner of its lip. In the dream, I couldn't move. All I could do was watch. The next day, I told myself I was settling in, that the weirdness was just part of the atmosphere. I kept cleaning, room by room, drawer by drawer. It was while reorganizing a cabinet in the embalming room that I noticed the logbook Ed had mentioned. It was thick, leather-bound, filled with tidy handwritten entries, names, dates, conditions, notes, everything precise. Raymond had kept records like a surgeon. The last entry was from July 1 Saint. It read, Samuel R. Male, 87, heart failure, no viewing, interred, off-site. After that, nothing. A full week before I arrived. That's when I realized something. There was a body in the fridge, not hidden just there, as if waiting. A white sheet covering most of it, but one pale foot poking out beneath. No tag, no entry, no name. Rule number 4 echoed in my mind. If you find any body not recorded in the official logbook, do not attempt to identify it. I backed out of the room, slowly. My skin felt cold. I closed the fridge door and tried to forget what I saw, but the image of that foot wouldn't leave me. The nails were clean, the skin oddly fresh. That night, I decided to follow the rules again. 10 p.m. I checked all 5 caskets in the display room, locked, but I hesitated on the 5th one. It was the same that had been cracked the night before. Something felt different. I don't know why, just heavier, like the lid resisted me. I leaned down and pressed my ear to the top. There was a sound, soft, muffled, breathing. I staggered back so fast, I tripped over a chair and slammed into the wall. I stood there, frozen, staring at the coffin. Nothing happened. The sound didn't return. The lid stayed closed. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was tired, that maybe I had a weird echo in my ear, but I locked it anyway, hands trembling, and I slept with the lights on at 2 a.m. I made the mistake of going to the bathroom. The hallway was dim. I hadn't turned off the embalming room lights, but they were flickering like they were losing power. The hum had returned, except now it wasn't just the fridge. It was something deeper, like something alive was vibrating in the walls. A pulsing, rhythmic sound. A thump. Then I heard something fall. I crept closer, heart pounding, and peeked into the embalming room. The body, the one in the fridge, was now lying on the table, fully uncovered. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. I didn't open that fridge. I didn't touch that body. But there it was, laid out like it was ready for prep, arms neatly at its sides. No sheet, no toe tag, no logbook entry. The lights above it were buzzing so violently it felt like they might explode. I backed away, slowly, and locked myself in the office for the rest of the night. By morning, the body was gone. I checked everything: fridge, prep table, the viewing room, nothing. But there was a single black footprint on the white tile floor, barefoot, damp, heading toward the chapel and one of the caskets. The 5th one was open again. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed for it. But I didn't. Maybe it was some stubborn sense of responsibility. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe the rules had done something to me, curled into my brain like a splinter. I stayed. That morning, I reread the list, over and over, searching for something I missed. Rule number 3 kept grabbing my attention. Never turn off the overhead lights in the embalming room. They may flicker or buzz, but they must remain on at all times. If they go out on their own, leave the building immediately and return after sunrise. The lights had flickered all night, but they hadn't gone out yet. I started keeping notes. Time, events, odd smells, changes in temperature. Something felt like it was building. At 3:06 a.m. on Thursday, the doorbell rang. I had almost forgotten about rule number 5. Every Thursday, a delivery will arrive between 3 o'clock and 3:15 a.m. Do not greet the driver. Do not sign any forms. Accept the package, lock it in cold storage, and record only the date. I hesitated for only a moment before going to the door. There was no truck, no headlights, just a man standing silently on the porch with a dolly and a covered stretcher. His face was in shadow, but I saw that his clothes were soaking wet, dripping. He didn't speak. He pushed the stretcher toward me and turned around, vanishing into the dark without a word. The body was wrapped in thick black, plastic, industrial, and sealed with a metal clasp. No label, no markings. I did what the rules said. I rolled it down the hallway, muscles tense, every sound echoing in the empty building. I opened the fridge and shoved it in as fast as I could. When I slammed the door shut, I almost expected it to scream. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the chapel, facing the caskets like they might move again, watching, listening. At some point, I dozed off. I woke up to the sound of the upstairs door creaking open. Not a bang, not a slam, just a slow, deliberate creak from the end of the second-floor hallway. The door that was supposed to stay locked. Rule number Y. The door at the end of the second-floor hallway must remain locked at all times. The key was never meant to be used. I grabbed a flashlight and crept up the stairs, each step feeling like a drumbeat in my chest. The hallway was pitch black. My light caught nothing but dust in the air and the yellowing, wallpaper peeling like old skin. The door at the end was slightly ajar. I approached it slowly, every instinct telling me to turn around, but I didn't. Inside was a small, windowless room, clean, unnaturally so. The walls were bare concrete. There was nothing inside but a wooden chair, a mirror leaning against the far wall, and a coat hook with something hanging from it, a set of keys, and a name tag, or Weatherby, my uncle's. I reached out to touch the mirror and paused. The reflection was wrong. It showed the room, the chair, the keys, but not me. I wasn't in it. I dropped the flashlight. It clattered loudly, and the beam swung across the room. For a split second, I saw something standing behind the chair, tall, thin, wrapped in plastic. By the time I picked up the light again, it was gone. I shut the door and ran downstairs, locking it behind me. The rest of the night was silent. Too silent. No fridge hum, no footsteps, nothing. When I checked the embalming room just after dawn, I saw the lights had gone out. Completely. No flicker, no buzz, just dark. I didn't go inside. I left the building and sat in my car until sunrise. When I finally went back in, the lights were back on, and someone had written something on the wall above the fridge. Stop unlocking the wrong doors. It was written in condensation from the inside. By the fifth day, I wasn't sleeping anymore. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mirror reflecting the room, but not me. Reflecting something behind me. I stopped staying upstairs entirely. I lived out of the front office now, keeping the lights on constantly. The funeral home didn't feel like a building anymore. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to slip. I kept thinking about the delivery man, the plastic-wrapped body, the footprints, the missing reflection. This wasn't just haunting, it was organized, and somehow my uncle had been keeping it in check, or at least trying to. I decided to go through his things. I had no other choice. There was one room I hadn't searched yet, the old records room behind the chapel. It was more of a closet, filled with stacked boxes labeled with years and initials. I started going through them one at a time. Most of it was boring ledgers, embalming logs, supply orders. But then I found a box labeled WHS Archive, private. Inside were VHS tapes, dozens of them, labeled with years dating back to 1992. Some were marked with single words. Thursday failure, Cry Chapel. I found an old portable TV with a built-in VCR in the break room. Miraculously, it still worked. I started with the tape labeled Thursday -6/14/1. The footage was grainy, black and white, and clearly from a fixed security camera in the embalming room. At first, it was uneventful. Time code running in the corner, empty table, fridge in the background. Then, at exactly 3:04 a.m., the fridge door opened on its own. Something stepped out. It looked like a man, but its movements were wrong. Limbs slightly too long, neck too stiff. It turned toward the camera slowly, and I swear for a split second it smiled. Then it walked across the room and lay itself down on the table. It didn't move again. The footage ended there. I watched 4 more tapes. Different dates, different times, but the same pattern. Always on a Thursday, always the same hour. A body arrives. It moves. It returns to stillness. I opened one last tape, marked failure, August 19th, 2004. This one was different. It showed a young man, an assistant entering the embalming room. He looked nervous, sweating, carrying a clipboard. He walked to the fridge, opened it, and leaned inside. Suddenly, something yanked him in. There was no scream, just a blur, a crash, and then silence. The tape cut out right after that. I shut it off, shaking. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely hold the remote. These weren't just spirits. This wasn't about ghosts. This was a system, a cycle, and my uncle had been managing it like a night janitor at the gates of hell. I returned to the rule list. Rereading it now, I noticed something I'd missed before. Faint, handwritten notes. In the margin next to rule number 5, the Thursday delivery. The notes were in Raymond's handwriting. Do not speak to them. They are not delivering. They are returning. Returning. What? I pulled the logbook out again, flipping toward the back. There were several entries written in red ink, unlike the others. Each was missing a name, just the dates. They were spaced exactly 7 days apart, each Thursday, and they went back years. A second log was tucked into the back cover, shorter, messier. Just a list of numbers. Totals. .1, column read, received. The other, returned. Some numbers didn't match. My uncle had kept a record, not just of who came in, but how many went back. And sometimes, the return didn't happen. There were gaps. I felt sick. That night, I went back to the chapel and stood in front of the 5th casket, the one that never seemed to stay closed. I knelt down, pressed my hand against the lid, and listened. Nothing. Silence. But there was a new scent in the air. Lilac. Same as the embalming fluid. Same as the faint, cloying smell that seemed to follow me around now. I turned to leave and saw something new. On the front pew, folded neatly, was a child's white funeral suit, identical to the one I'd found behind the curtain. Only this one was wet. Still damp. I picked it up with 2 fingers, not sure why. Inside the pocket was a funeral card. There was no name, just a date. August 9th, 1995. I flipped it over. Written in thick, smudged pen. He never made it home. That's when I remembered something my mother had told me years ago. A brief, passing mention. Uncle Raymond had a son, a little boy. I'd never met him. No one talked about him. But I remembered her saying once quietly, over dinner, that funeral ruined Ray. After that, he never came back from who he was. I looked at the card again. August 9th, a Wednesday. The body must have arrived Thursday. He never buried his son. He kept him, maybe. The first body that moved wasn't some lost spirit. Maybe it was his boy, returned, or something wearing him like a mask. The next night, I broke a rule. Not on purpose, not exactly. It was 9:58 p.m., and I was running late. I'd fallen asleep, really. Asleep for the first time in days. A deep, dreamless slumber that felt unnatural. Too quiet, too dark. I woke up disoriented. The air around me thick and heavy like I'd been drugged. The moment I saw the time on the wall clock, panic gripped my chest. I ran straight to the display room. 2 of the caskets were already open, wide open. I rushed to close them, fumbling the latches with shaking hands. Then I checked the others. The 3rd was fine, the 4th too, but when I reached the 5th, my stomach dropped. It wasn't just open, it was empty. I stared at the lining, smooth, untouched. No dust, no signs that anything had ever been in it. But I knew better. I had locked that casket every single night. It was always slightly ajar when I came back, always the same one, and now it was just gone. I backed away slowly, eyes darting, around the room. Then I heard it. A soft, wet sound, dripping dot from behind me. I turned. The hallway leading to the embalming room was dark. The overhead lights, once flickering and buzzing like angry wasps, were now completely silent, dead, just like rule number 3 had warned. I should have left, gone outside, waited until sunrise. But something pulled me toward the dark. Not curiosity, not defiance. Something colder, like a thread wrapped around my ribs, tugging gently. I moved toward the hallway. With each step, the temperature dropped. The air turned damp. The scent of lilac and rust was thick enough to choke on. When I reached the doorway to the embalming room, I stopped. The lights were off. The hum was gone, and on the metal table, beneath a pale circle of moonlight from the vent above, something was sitting up, not lying, not still, sitting. Its back was to me, shoulders hunched. Long black hair hung in wet strands over its face. Its skin, what I could see of it, was gray-blue, like meat left too long in a freezer. I stepped back. The figure tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously, like it heard my breath. Then it stood, not with a jerk, not like in the movies. It rose, deliberate, controlled, bones cracking with quiet restraint. I turned and ran down the hallway, through the chapel, past the empty pews, and the faint scent of decayed flowers. I could hear it behind me, bare feet slapping the tile. Slow and steady, not rushing. It didn't have to rush, it knew where I'd go. I reached the front office and slammed the door shut, locking it. I pushed the desk in front of it, backed into the corner, and held my breath. The footsteps stopped. For a long time, there was silence. Then, scratching, gentle at first, a dragging sound across the wood, slow and wet. Nails, or something like nails, tracing along the edge of the doorframe. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Then the voice came, not loud, not monstrous, just a whisper. You opened it. I froze. You let it breathe. I could feel it just outside the door, inches away. Something so old and hollow, it had forgotten how to be human, and yet it knew how to speak, how to mock. We can't go back now. The lights flickered. The air pressure dropped like something heavy had stepped into the room. Then silence again. I sat there for hours. Eventually, the sun began to rise. A soft orange glow filtered in through the dusty blinds. I stood, pulled the desk away, opened the door. No one was there, but just down the hall, in the chapel. The 5th casket was shut again, locked. There were no footprints, no blood, no evidence of anything, except one thing. The mirror from the upstairs room was now leaning against the far wall of the chapel. It hadn't been there before, and this time, when I looked into it, I saw myself. But behind me, something moved. I spun around. Nothing, only silence. I turned back to the mirror, and now, there was nothing at all. No reflection, no room, just darkness. Then, I saw words, scrawled across the glass in something thick and red. Return what was borrowed. I backed away. All the caskets were still shut. Nothing looked out of place, but I knew something had been released, or worse, welcomed, in whatever my uncle had locked away in that room. Upstairs it had found a new door. I didn't hear from Ed again. After everything that happened that night, the whispering thing, the mirror, the threat, I expected him to show up, to knock on the door with some cryptic warning, or maybe an explanation. But nothing, just more silence. By the second day, I started calling around. Funeral directories, local retirement centers. I even called the number on the business card he'd left behind in that first meeting. Disconnected. I dug through the funeral home's records again, this time looking specifically for Ed's name. I remembered he said he'd worked with Raymond. There had to be something. Payroll, contracts, anything. I found it buried in the 2005 ledger. A single line item. Edmund L. Contractor, temporary. Only one payment. Only 1 month then. Nothing. It was like he vanished after that. But I remembered his face, the look in his eyes when he gave me the rule sheet. He wasn't warning me, he was handing something off. Passing the torch, I'd been so focused on the rules, the building, the boda's eye, hadn't seen it. He wasn't helping me, he was retiring. That night, I decided to check the locked room upstairs. One last time. I knew I shouldn't. The rules made it clear, but that room had been left open once already by someone, or something, and the mirror that had appeared downstairs had come from there. The key was still in the top drawer of the reception desk. Same one with the logbook, same one Ed had told me not to use. I climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in one hand, key in the other. The hallway was colder than usual. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and something behind the walls ticked rhythmically, like a clock with no hands. The door stood at the end plane, white, featureless. I slid the key into the lock. It turned easier this time. When I pushed the door open, I expected the room to be empty. It wasn't. Someone was sitting in the chair, back straight, hands folded in their lap. It was Ed. He didn't move when I stepped inside. Didn't blink. Ed, I whispered. He turned his head slowly, his eyes glassy, unfocused. I stepped closer. The smell hit me before I reached the center of the room, sweet and sick, like rotting flowers and spoiled milk. His lips parted. I told you not to come here, he said. His voice was dry, cracking. You left, I whispered. You disappeared. He nodded, but barely. Time was up. I held it back as long as I could. What is it? I asked. What's in this place? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. The same yellowed paper as the rule sheet. He held it out to me with a shaking hand. I took it. Inside was a second list. New rules. Shorter, but more specific. New rules for the caretaker Weatherby site. Active, you cannot leave unless someone takes your place. No one lasts forever. The fifth casket must be watched, not locked. If it stays shut on its own, something is wrong. Do not burn the body. It makes them loud. If the mirror ever goes dark, break it immediately. Even if someone is still inside, do not trust the ones who speak clearly. They've had time to practice. The funeral never ended. Act accordingly. I looked up, but Ed was no longer looking at me. He was staring at the mirror. And then I realized something awful. It wasn't a reflection. It was another room identical, reversed. A dark twin of the one we were standing in. And in the chair across the glass, someone else was sitting. Something. It looked like Ed, but younger, fresher. Its eyes moved too smoothly. Its smile was wrong. Return what was borrowed, it whispered from behind the glass. Ed's body sagged in the chair, a long exhale. His shoulders dropped. He was gone. I backed out of the room and slammed the door shut. I locked it, took the key, threw it into the woods behind the building. Whatever bargain my uncle made, whatever deal Ed had agreed to, it had been handed down to me. And the scariest part wasn't what was behind the glass. It was that a part of me understood. I spent the next 20 hours preparing to leave. It wasn't some dramatic realization. It was quiet, muted. I just knew I couldn't stay. I had inherited something I was never meant to hold. Whatever this place was, it needed a caretaker, and I wasn't it. I packed a bag, only essentials, left the rest behind. The rule sheets, the logs, the tapes. I left them on the chapel podium like some kind of offering. Let whoever stumbled in next find them. Let them choose. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be random. This place didn't choose at all. It waited. It wore you down, until leaving felt worse than staying. The sun was setting when I stepped outside. For the first time in days, I could smell fresh air, hear cicadas, see the orange light hit the tree line like something out of a painting. My car was parked just down the driveway. I was 10 feet from it when I saw the little white card tucked beneath the windshield wiper. I stopped, my heart already sinking. I pulled it out with numb fingers. It was a funeral card, just like the one in the chapel suit. This one had a name, Daniel Weatherby, age 6, my uncle's son. The back was blank, no date, no cause, just one handwritten sentence. He was returned, but not forgiven. I looked up back at the house. One of the upstairs windows was open. A pale face stared down at me, not moving, not blinking, just watching. I turned back to the car. The driver's door was already open. There was someone sitting in the front seat. At first, I thought it was my own reflection in the side mirror, until it turned and smiled at me. It had my face back pal, slightly wrong, like it was built from memory instead of flesh. It reached for the steering wheel slowly, deliberately. That's when I realized the place wasn't haunted. It didn't trap you physically. It replaced you. It studied you, echoed you, and when the time was right, it sent something else out in your place. I backed away from the car, heart slamming against my ribs. I ran, not back to the house, not toward the woods. I ran around the building past the crematorium, past the forgotten garden, where the older graves had crumbled into moss and stone. I ran until I reached the storm shelter behind the supply shed, something I'd only seen once during a walk around the property. The door was rusted, heavy, but it opened. Inside was a small concrete stairwell leading into darkness. I had no light, no plan, but I went down anyway. I expected storage, tools, junk. What I found was a second, embalming room. No windows, no cameras, just rows of metal drawers and one massive cold chamber. On the wall beside it, a name etched into steel, returns only. This was where the bodies really went, the ones no one spoke of, the ones that didn't belong to the world anymore. I understood what I had to do. One final rule, one final choice. I went back upstairs, just long enough to retrieve the plastic-wrapped body from the fridge. The one that had arrived on Thursday, still sealed, still unnamed. I wheeled it down into the storm shelter, heart pounding with every bounce of the stretchers. Wheels dot at the cold chamber door. I hesitated. Something inside me whispered not to do it, that to open it would be a betrayal of something ancient, something watching. But I remembered the writing on the mirror, return what was borrowed. I opened the chamber. Inside was pitch black, but as I pushed the stretcher in, I heard something from deep within, a breath, then soft words, muffled by distance. Thank you. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and when I came back up, the car was empty. The card was gone, and the pale face in the window, no longer there. I didn't leave. I tried. I walked down the driveway again, gripping the keys so hard they bit into my palm. The sun was rising. Birds were chirping, but something in the air felt wrong, not heavy, empty. I got to the end of the driveway, stood beside the mailbox, and looked out at the road. It went on for miles, straight, clear, but the longer I stared at it, the more I realized something. There were no cars, no wind, no sound, except the ones I brought with me. I stepped onto the pavement, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. No service. I hadn't checked in days. I turned back to look at the funeral home, and that's when I saw it. The sign, the old, rusted hanging sign by the entrance gate, where it used to say, Weatherby Funeral Home and Mortuary Services, in faded gold lettering. It didn't say that anymore. Now, etched deeply into the cracked wood, was just one word, caretaker. Number. Address. No hours. Just a roll. I didn't go back inside right away. I stood at the gate for a long time, hoping anything would prove me wrong. A car passing by. A call. A plane overhead. But nothing came. And the strange thing is, I'm not afraid anymore, because I understand it now. The rules weren't instructions. They were conditioning. Little rituals to train your body, keep you compliant, keep you from asking questions. Each rule shaved a little more of you away until there's nothing left but a mirror image, something close enough to pass. It's peaceful here, in its own way, quiet, predictable. I single quotes V started writing my own list of rules revised for the next person. If there ever is one, they'll find it under the desk, tucked behind the ledger. They'll think I was trying to help them, and maybe I am. But part of me wonders if that's what Ed thought too, or Raymond. Before him, maybe none of us were victims. Maybe we all just gave in. One night at a time, one rule at a time, until the funeral home wasn't haunted by ghosts, but by copies, imitations of people who never quite left, because the bodies don't move on their own. They're carried by whoever stays long enough to become part of the staff. I hear footsteps now, upstairs, deliberate, familiar. One of the drawers just opened itself. I already know which one, the fifth, and this time, I'm not going to lock it.